Hi, everybody. Welcome back. So today we'll be talking about different typical settings for breathwork and how to choose the one that might be most fitting for you. And it's a great pleasure to be doing that again in a conversation with fellow breathwork coach Trevor Bird and get, again, a couple of different perspectives on this. And the main settings we'll talk about are in a group, so in a breathwork circle, then one-on-one with a coach or a guide, and of course also alone on your own in your home. And yeah, just have a little look at how these different settings can help the process in different ways and typical experiences that work best in certain settings. And also just what our own experiences and preferences are. And on the way, we're also touching on a couple of related subjects like, the common humanity that you can experience in breathwork and all those kinds of things. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope it's useful to you, and I'll see you on the other side. Let's talk a little bit about different settings that you can do breathwork in. And maybe what's useful is if we say a little bit about what we've been doing mostly and how that has its different kind of uses and good things and bad things about it.
So do you want to start?
Should I start? Okay, cool. I'll start.
Sorry
um,
to put the ball on you there.
that's good.
It's early in the morning. I just need to get my brain chugging. I need to come on, and then I'll be good. I just need the initial push.
Yeah, so for me, I started mainly with group sessions actually. So kind of anywhere between 5 and 20 people breathing in a circle together. And then I also did some sessions alone later on, once I'd, you know, had quite a bit of breath work under my belt, like after session 20 or so on, mostly for logistical reasons, right? Just if I felt, oh, I really need to figure something out and, there's no group around at that moment, I just started doing sessions on my own also a little bit. But funny enough, my training uh, mostly means that I give individual sessions, right? So I guide people individually, either alone or in pairs, right? So funny enough, that's the thing I myself have done the least, but that's the thing I do most with people. Um, and yeah, I definitely felt that these three settings, so kind of in a big group, one-on-one with a facilitator or guide, and all on your own, definitely have their different kind of flavor to it. And yeah, of course, in the pandemic now, you don't always have the choice, but I think it's good to kind of know what the options are. And if you have a choice, then to kind of see what fits best for you. So for me, the group, I think what's most important is that the group energy is a really powerful thing. So the group energy really carries you, I would say. And it also a lot of the time brings up things in really interesting ways. So also the people next to you can really kind of start processes anew. Sometimes they can be kind of in an annoying way, right? You go like, oh, why is this person screaming? But then that does interesting things. And sometimes it can just be in a straightforward, sort of inspiring way also. And then the individual sessions on your own, I think for me, it's generally a little bit harder to kind of when you're really on your own in a room, I find it harder to get into the process. It's just sometimes really practically the only way. But if I had a choice, I would usually want either a group or a guide with me, honestly, because I find that it's much harder to let go of your defense mechanisms, right? Because I think there's a security system in you that kind of says, okay, you're all alone in this room. If you freak out, that wouldn't be very good. And so it's much harder to tell that system to relax and, to kind of go with the flow of the session. But how about you, Trevor?
Yeah, I think you brought up some amazing points there. I think that starting off breath work, if you've never done it before, group setting is definitely the way to go because it's such a deep experience and there's so much to get from it. Especially if you're like, what is breath work? I'm just gonna start breathing. You're not gonna get anything out of it. There needs to be like a process to it of like how to do it. And like you said, the group mentality, it's like a marathon. Like breath work is work. It's not just like a day-to-day breath. It's challenging. Like you meet all these edges in you that you don't want to do. Oh my God, this is hard. Why am I going to cry? Why am I going to laugh? And there's a lot of emotional turbulence going on. So I think that group breath work is like that's how to start. And some other good points in that is the reflection process of, usually when I come out of a group session, when you meet your edges, like, my God, this guy's screaming next to me and I find it so annoying. Generally 10 minutes later, you're going to unfold some kind of life pattern where, I'm just spitballing here, but like something terrible happens and then you don't like it and then you start to judge it and then it starts to like show up within you and then it's like a projection. So it's like a lot of like emotional, deep psychotherapeutic work on like how to get through your triggers and how to get through your challenges. So having a support group to process that with, and integrative work afterwards, is so important to sit and normalize your experience, because like it's a psychedelic experience and some weird shit happens and people kind of get into it and they're like, that was a really strange experience and I don't know what to do with this. And um definitely knowing that after you've done it, a couple of dozen times, and you've kind of went through the whole range of like feeling weird and laughing and crying and anger and happiness and joy and releasing all these stuck emotions in us, it's important to have those mirrors to normalize what we went through, to just be like, hey, you're okay and it's normal. Because like the number one question with new breathers is like, is this normal? Like, I can't feel my hands, I can't move, I want to scream, I was crying, like the emotional releases can be so intense that it's like, is that normal? Because I mean, people, and especially for people that have never, are like not comfortable with their emotions, live very much in their head and don't, are kind of disconnected from their body and their somatic experiences. Because when we take that energy and bring it down into our body, if you're not comfortable with being in your body, it can, I'm not going to say it can be traumatic, but it can be scary, because people generally don't live in their body, they live in their head, especially for males.
Yes.
So yeah, so it's like, it's just the group mentality and normalizing the whole process that happens, I think, is so important. And that being said, like I didn't even start. I've been breathing like every day for 4 years now, maybe more, and I just started breathing totally alone, like in sessions, like maybe 6 months ago. So, and that's not to say it's right or wrong or whatever. It's whatever works for you. But I mean, I've only felt compelled to like lie down on my back and breathe for an hour alone to some Into the Deep music mixes, which are awesome. Um, yeah, like just did that a couple of days ago with the trauma one, and like I was having a good day and like it was good, but like, man, I got into some shit there, So uh and like you said, it takes a lot of willpower to go there, because it's like, oh, this is hard, maybe I'll just breathe slower, maybe I won't go there, I'm not going to scream, I'm not. But when you have a coach, it's like you have a one-on-one coach, if you have somebody that's kind of guiding you through it. And I find hand placement as well, like when you're going through it, if there's energy in your body and the guide can kind of tell what's going on, and as long as you're okay with being touched, like consent is always very big, obviously. But if you're having blocked energy somewhere, and just a hand, even your own hands, like you can even do it to yourself. But when you have a guide that's a bit more experienced, it can kind of see where the energy is being blocked, where your breath is not being fully drawn into your belly, just bringing awareness to those, the resistance or the tightness, can have a ton of release. So yeah, if it's available to you, a breathing coach is always a beautiful thing. And if you feel compelled, like it's like a solo journey, it's also a beautiful thing too. As long as you're open to experiencing, you're gonna get something out of it. It's just all different.
Absolutely, I completely agree. And I think just the openness that you mentioned now, that actually goes for all settings. That's, I think, one of the really key ingredients for having the journey that you need. Also, for example, in groups, let's say you have someone next to you who does stuff that you find quite scary or quite annoying. This is exactly, I think the openness is exactly the key to go like, okay, what's happening in me? Why is that a thing for me, and really to explore with this curiosity. Usually that brings up really useful stuff. Whereas if you go like, well, now I can't concentrate, this is really difficult, then it might not be a bad session, but it might be a bit frustrating and not as useful, right? So I think the openness is really the key ingredient.
Yeah, and I think
Then
just to give the listeners like a solid like example is, like, say you're breathing with a bunch of people and one person starts screaming in rage. that's happened. That's happened, right? So, and then you start to get really scared and shut down and like, oh my God, I hope he's okay. And then, what can I do? Oh, I need to open my eyes. I need to go help him. How does your caregiver mentality kick in? Where does your caregiver mentality kick in life? When people get really angry with you or around you in life, how do you react to that? And when you're in an internal journey of your own psyche, breathing, like it's just breath, and it's so incredible that you can actually start to recognize your life patterns of how you relate to other people's emotions in a group setting. So it's a personal development tool.
Absolutely. And yeah, if you have the choice between an individual coach and a group, I think there's also a couple of interesting things to think about. So for me, the feeling was always that if you really want this sort of energy to bounce off, groups are kind of the best thing ever. But what might happen is that, if you really need a lot of care, you may not have enough guides or facilitators there to, be with you all of the time, right? So if you feel like you might feel a bit too vulnerable if you're left to your own devices, and or if you feel like you're really not at the point to connect to a lot of people. I think that's the two reasons where I would say a one-on-one session is kind of the best way to go. I've definitely seen people, and I think also at some phases in my life, I was at the point where if I was breathing with 15 people, I would mainly just be incredibly intimidated by the presence of all these different processes and just be really distracted by that, because that would have been too much at that point.
Mhm.
So then I think it's nice to maybe go with a one-on-one session, have someone there who definitely is holding space for you, who you should absolutely trust. I think that's really important. Find someone you absolutely trust, who you're not second guessing. And
Safety. And
absolutely,
in any group or solo session, I mean, you want a setting that's safe, because I don't think it's not like when you're deep in a breath session, I find you just can't open your eyes and be up and start walking around. Like you go to a state of it's a deep meditative state that will take a couple of minutes to come out of. And even just saying that, it's like I'm realizing like how deep of a state of meditation that is, because to think that you could just stop breathing, get up and start walking around, like that's it's crazy to me. Like that seems so not okay. So I think that's really fascinating. And yeah, like making sure that you trust your guide, you trust the people around you, nothing weird's going to happen, and as long as you can trust that, I mean, safety is the basic human needs. So if we don't have
absolutely.
that, it's going to ruin a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also because, I mean, one of the main points of breathwork is to open you up, right? And to
Mm,
kind of explore new parts of yourself that you might not be so in touch with, right? And that's an incredibly vulnerable thing to do. And as you said, I mean, the group can be really inspiring and can also really normalize the whole thing, basically, to the experience, and also the perception, right? So I found that really helpful actually when you see other people go through so much pain, right? And you see them before and you think, well, that's a normal person, right? You might not even have that much relation to them. You might think like, oh, they're doing life very differently, right? But then when you get to the fundamentals, like in a breathwork session, you see, okay, they're trying just as hard. They're probably struggling with the same feelings, with the same, humanness, basically. And I think that's an incredibly important thing to not just know, but to experience, right?
I love that, Martha. I think that's so powerful because we all are on the human journey, and no matter who we are, we all have emotions, and we all try to run away from them, and we all try to avoid them. And when we're in a breath session, it's like for me, I think that's a real expansion of consciousness conversation of, like you always have these stories about, oh, if people have a lot of money, they're a certain way, or if people are actors, or if they have like certain amount of clout, they're a certain way. But when you all get in the room and breathe, like you're all on a level playing field, and everybody, you start to realize that no matter where we come from, we're all the same.
That's
Um, yeah, and I just want to caveat that like I've cried before in my life, but I have never ever cried so hard than in breathwork sessions. Like I don't even know where it comes from, but the deep, deep seated grief that I guess I've been locking away for so long. Like it is a gut. It's just such a deep release of emotions. And there's something euphoric about that. And I don't say that to scare anybody, but when you move that energy around that has been essentially trapped in our nervous system or in our body, I mean, it is so liberating.
Absolutely. And I think also to add to that, because I think sometimes maybe people get this impression that, the sort of this release of, pent up emotion, I think that's a super important part of breathwork, but also kind of finding new powers, right? So also,
Mm.
I've seen people, for example, go into crazy yoga poses, right? People who are not sporty, who never really do anything, and suddenly they, in this crazy pose, and or people roar like lions, all these things where you're really connecting to parts of yourself that our normal everyday life doesn't invite, right?
Yeah, well, and then and again, just to bring it to everyday examples, so people can kind of understand, it's like, if every time you get angry, you don't allow yourself to get angry, you
Mhm.
start to store this in your body. You start to store it, who knows where, but tension, and be like, oh, I can't express this, I can't express this, and then in a breathwork session, you get to this point where you're just like, ah, like you just need to like that it starts to move around that like stored energy, so it comes out in some ways that you might not be expecting. And when you tap into that repression that you've been holding on to for so long, and whether that's grief or anger or joy or whatever it is, it can be very magnified.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's the two big things right now, at least. I mean, I think you know, every society has its own little, ways of doing things. But for now, at least, I think in our generation, the two things that are most repressed are vulnerability, but also really this power and freedom, right? And these are the two things that I think most of us don't feel enough, right? This like magnificent beauty that people also have, right? Just kind of standing there and saying, okay, this is actually all I am, and that's it's worth this presence, right?
Yeah, and I just want to like just this is just gets me going. We could probably just talk about this forever. It doesn't even need to be in like a formatted style, but like I think that's why like the way that I guide breathwork sessions is very intentional of like where we go and just the stuff that I talk about in terms of like when you're breathing. Um, I think it's also a benefit to do that because it kind of brings you into that mindset. Like it's always a journey, like especially with a bunch of like, because when we do sessions, I mean, we have people that have never breathed before, and we have people that breathe all the time. So it's, I know when I say breathe, I mean like breath work. I don't mean just breathing. We all breathe, obviously, but there's a whole bunch of different walks of experience in life. And um I started doing this with like breathing life into death and like experiencing our death, because when we get to that state that's so deep and we start like our thoughts fall away and there's nothing left to think about except for being with our complete consciousness. And when I do breath work, I see my consciousness, and that's not to sound too woo, but like like I see it. I have a perfect picture of it, and I can just be with myself at a deeper level than I've ever been. In like it's almost like weird to think about. You're like, what the fuck does that even mean? But then when you get there, like, oh, that's it. Like thoughts cannot even penetrate where you are. Like you cannot think about outside life, or you cannot think about what you're doing later today. It just does not allow itself into the state that you're in. And so having like a guide, kind of talk you through that and get you there, notice where your thoughts are, what's going on for you. And when you can kind of bring awareness to where you're at, it really helps like the first time breathers, or like the people that don't really know where to go. It can kind of just be like a hey, try bringing awareness to this.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. That's exactly what I would be looking for in a guide also, is first of all someone who has this kind of presence, non-judgmental presence, right? To
mm,
really make you feel that whatever is coming up is okay. And then someone who's able to help you meet your defense system, right? Like as you said, like if there's energy pent up somewhere, and especially if you haven't done a lot of breath work, then you might not know what to do with this. And if there's someone who kind of can help you move through that and kind of get it flowing basically, then I think that can be extremely helpful. um yeah, and also just this, I mean, I tend to talk about it in terms of an iceberg. That's why Into the Deep has an iceberg as a logo. Because basically, I think all this conscious stuff, right? All the little voices that talk, all the stuff where we go like, this is me, is probably, I would say, 5% maybe of us. And everything else is under the surface. And it takes a while to get used to not just identifying with the talky part, but actually identifying with the other 95% that feel so much bigger and so much deeper. And again, I think
I could take this conversation into a totally new direction, but I for the sake of breathwork, I won't. But yeah, I think that's, I mean, you know, we're so obsessed with humanity, and people are just so obsessed with labels and structuring things and people. And it's like we need to live within this box of like, I am this, you know, and when we start to make life decisions based on this box that we create around ourselves and the way that people view this box, you know, we want this box to look perfect, but when we can do the breath work, and I love the iceberg thing, but uh, yeah, I think that we all like to confine ourselves, and breath work kind of makes that box kind of fall away, and you can start to expand yourself and be like, hey, maybe I'm not who I thought I was, or I don't need to be within this box.
exactly. And I think either in a group or with one-on-one sessions, it's really good to have people around you who are already a bit more comfortable with that, right?
Mm.
Who really kind of, also are not startled by the other 95% of you, or, don't feel that it's weird, and just go like, okay, cool. Let's have a look. Let's have a look what's there. And yeah, I think that's the beauty of breathing either in a group or with a guide. Right. So this was our little take on different breathwork settings, as well as life, the universe, and everything. I hope that it was useful to you. And if you have any comments or questions or anything to add, please feel very welcome to leave them below. And I'll respond as much as I can. And I'm always curious to hear what you guys think. And until then, or until the next video, happy breathing. Bye.